All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Glenn Siepert, and I'm sitting here over coffee with my friend and your friend, Alexander John Shaia. He's in Spain. I'm in the US. I think it's nearing the end of the day for you, Alexander, but it's early in the day for me. But we're here and you're here.
It's late afternoon here
Yep.
on the west coast of Spain. I'm looking out my windows and I'm told 5,000 miles directly out my windows is New York City.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I'm waving from over here. I don't
All
know if you
right.
can see me, but but Alexander, how are you, first of all? And secondly, tell us why we're here today. What is going on?
I'm good. We want to start a series of conversations
Hmm.
and we want to think about what happens after deconstruction. And so I've done a lot of work in reanimating the traditional Christian Gospels
Hmm.
because one of the things that I know is that every great tradition, when it needs to reimagine itself, and Buddhism had to do this, Judaism had to do this, Hinduism had to do it. This is not new, what Christianity is going through right now. But we don't throw out the stories, we find a new way to understand them. And my work is what I think of as one of the new ways that Christianity might move forward.
That's really good because a lot of times it's easy to, when you deconstruct, use that word deconstruct, to throw the baby out with the bathwater, throw it all away. When in reality, like you said, you can reimagine it into maybe something much greater than you ever perceived before.
Yeah, I mean, I am very excited about Christianity, and I know I bear the wounds, as many of us do, of the old understandings. But there is something vital and fresh and exciting that's coming.
That's really good. I took some heat on Facebook about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago, because I had mentioned, I said that I'm still a Christian. And I had this big explanation as to why. And a lot of people, I got some messages from people, and some people who are very against Christianity because of a lot of the obvious problems in the past. How could you possibly call yourself a Christian still? Blah blah blah. Then there's the other side who was very intrigued by that because as I explained from things I've learned from you and other places, that Christianity is so diverse, and many of us, like myself, were handed this narrow stream of evangelicalism, and that's all I thought Christianity was. But you've come along and said, "Oh no, there's so much more."
There is, and I mean, I know the wounds.
Hmm.
I know the judgments that we have all had to bear. And I know how much it has hurt us emotionally, physically, spiritually. And that's just not all of Christianity.
All right, so we're going to talk about a story today, you and I, from the Gospel of Matthew, and it's a story that many people are probably familiar with, but we're going to read it anyway, just in case people aren't. But the story is about Peter rebuking Jesus, as if that's ever a good idea, right? And then Jesus refers to him as Satan or the adversary and tells him that he needs to take up his cross and follow him. Now, I'm wondering, Alexander, for our listeners, I'd like to read for them the translation of the story that you wrote, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about a couple of the key differences, I think, in your translation versus a traditional NIV or RSV or whatever. And then we'll talk a little bit about the story. Does that sound good?
It sounds great because
All
I'm
right.
all about reanimating the stories in a fresh way.
Awesome. Okay. So I have it pulled up on my screen here. Okay. It comes from the book of Matthew, like we said. What chapter is it, Alexander? Do you remember?
Actually, I
Uh,
don't.
I don't remember
I
either.
think
Oh, wait. It's
it,
the 16th chapter. I got it here.
thank
Matthew
you.
16, verses 21 through 28. All right. So from this moment on, Jesus begins to show us, the disciples, that she, the Messiah, must go to Jerusalem, undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and scribes, be killed, and on the third day be raised. Now, Petros, Peter, takes Jesus aside and begins to rebuke her, saying, Yahweh forbid it. This must never happen to you. Jesus turned and admonishes Petros, Peter, O voice of the adversary, Satan, get behind me. This belief is a stumbling block to being a follower of the way. You are focusing on your own ego desire, focusing on lesser awareness rather than greater knowing. Then Jesus tells us if you want to be a follower of the way, restrain your ego desire for ease. Take up your cross and follow in the way of authenticity. For if you wish to hold to your ego desires, you will lose your authentic life. Yet if you restrain your ego desires for sake of the way, you will find your greater authenticity. What will it profit you if you gain the whole world but forfeit your authentic life? What could you give in return for losing your own true you? For the Son of Man, daughter of woman, the Messiah, will come with the angels in the glory of his, her, father, mother, source, and will recognize everyone for what each has done. Truly, I tell you, some of you standing here will not taste physical death before you see the Son of Man, the daughter of woman, the Messiah, coming in the reign of the Spirit. All right, so there's two things, Alexander, that I noticed right off the bat when I read that passage up against like the NIV or something that I was raised with. So number one is the story you translate it in the present tense. Like it doesn't say from this moment on Jesus began to show, but from this moment on he begins to show as if he's still showing us something right now, like in this moment. And then number two, which I find really interesting, is you use a lot of inclusive language. Like you refer to the Messiah as he, she, as opposed to what many of us would expect being Jesus, simply he. So maybe before we talk about the story, you could talk to us a little bit about these two unique qualities of your translation and kind of why you bring this to the text. And you don't just do it with this text, you do it with all the text. So what's going on here?
Right. And as you know, I'm in the process of translating all four of the Gospels in this fresh language. And one of the key elements is the stories are present moment.
Mhm,
Um, as soon as we read something in past tense, our brains immediately go to history.
mhm,
And what is so true about the gospel text for the communities when they were first written, they were not hearing it as history, they were hearing it as present moment reality. And so I want to bring that exactly to us that Jesus is not a reality of 2,000 years ago, but Jesus is a reality right now. And what is happening in the story is happening in our lives right now.
mm,
And that this story is so much about, in some ways, this story is about the need to deconstruct.
mm,
That Jesus is going to Jerusalem where the elders are going to put him on trial. And all of us have old ways of thinking that no longer serve us. And Jesus is always in the present moment saying, think now, think fresh, think larger, be larger. Yesterday's faith was the beautiful faith of yesterday. Today is new. And God is larger than you have been thinking.
It's almost like Peter is that for me, Peter is almost symbolic of that inner voice. I call him the Christian soldier voice, the one who says, "Oh no, like you can't." Something new comes along, it's like, "No, no, no. You got it. You say no to that. You know, you can't possibly go that route." When in reality, like you said, that's an invitation into maybe something new.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
mean, Peter is in the Gospels tradition is a traditional voice.
Hmm.
He really is struggling with deconstructing what he has known
Yeah.
to learn something wider and larger and more vital.
Yeah.
So in that way, Peter is us.
Mm,
It's like deconstruction and then reanimation is always going on. It's not a you do this and then you do that.
hmm.
And I'm still finding these places in myself after all these years of like, oh God, how could I? Oh yeah, there was that prejudice, that bias, and I hadn't rethought that.
Yep. Yeah, I had this mindset for a while, kind of like, well, I've deconstructed. Now it's time to go on to do bigger and better things. But now, like you said, I'm finding it's cyclical. It's seasonal. Like it comes and it goes, and it's here and then it's gone, and then it's there for an extended period of time. Sometimes it's a shorter period of time. But like you said, there's always something new that I come across. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to rethink that in light of what I've learned about this other thing.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So what about the other part of that question then about the inclusive language, about referring to
Yeah.
like the Messiah as he and she? Like what is going on there? Talk to us about that.
Right. So, my background is Lebanese,
Hmm.
Maronite Rite, Roman Catholic. Aramaic was the language that was used in my Sunday worship services. So I've got this ear for Aramaic, some basic understanding of it, can speak a very, very, very small amount.
Mm,
But Aramaic is a language about a present moment. And that's why I also know that these texts need to be said in the present moment.
mm,
Aramaic has very little sense of a tense.
mm,
But also in Aramaic, Messiah, and I know in English people say Messiah, but in Aramaic, Messiah, and the last part of the name is actually the out breath, Messiah.
mm,
The Messiah is everything that has come forth from God. So, has only one part of us come forth from God? Has only one of all the gender variations come from God?
only men.
Yeah.
No.
So Jesus is a full messenger
Mhm,
and message of the Messiah. And as a human, Jesus had to be embodied as in a gender expression. But the Messiah is all of us. That reality is in all of us. So that all of us can look at the Messiah and see ourselves reflected.
mm,
And this
yeah.
was so much part of Paul's teaching because Paul was the one who understood that Jesus, the Messiah, was showing us something much larger than just a person in a body.
Mm,
That the Messiah had always been. He kept having to teach his own people. Who was with you in the desert when you came out of Egypt? The Messiah. Who was with you when you crossed into the promised land? The Messiah. The Messiah has always been, always. Now in Jesus, we see that the Messiah has also taken human form
mm.
to remind us that the Messiah lives in all of us.
Yeah, growing up, those that particular passage was, it was more about Jesus, like the person of Jesus has always been. And so it was about finding Jesus in these Old Testament stories. And honestly, for me, like I went along with that because that's what I was told. But in my mind, I'm like, it feels like there's gotta be more than that. That just seems a little bit like it's gotta be more than just this historical person of Jesus was in the rock. There's gotta be something else. But when you came along and you talked about that Messiah and that breath of God and that breath of the divine being in everything and around everything and all over and always has been, then I'm like, oh, like that makes so much more sense to think that the breath of God was with the people back then, just as the breath of God is with the people in this moment.
Right. And the breath is always expanding us and
Yeah.
always
Mm.
expanding our understanding and our awareness. So
Yeah.
I really would, wherever you are on the variation of gender, I want you to understand that you are an expression of the breath of the Messiah.
Mm. That brings it brings such more life, I think, to the story because when I first came across one of your translations of the text and I saw that, I'll be honest with you, the to refer back to Peter, the inner Peter rose up, was like, "Nope, that's not right. That's not the way that it is." And I went back to I was really struggled with, God has to be a man because I came from that mentality that you know, God had a gender in a sense, even though God didn't have a gender, but God kind of did maybe leaned more towards this gender, I guess you could say. And so I really struggled to let that go and to allow that part of my belief and that part of my faith evolve. But once I released my grip on it and allowed myself to wonder, well, what if? What if there is more to it than this? It opened up so many different doors for me, I think, in my walk with God, and helped me to be in a much different place today than I was then. Amen. Amen.
Or as I say in my Aramaic, Amin.
That's right. That's right. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this story. What exactly is going on in this story? Because again, like the setting that I was raised in, and so growing up in church and in school and even in seminary, like this passage was meant to remind me that my life is supposed to be hard. My life is supposed to be gruesome in a sense, and I'm supposed to carry my cross, my own bloody cross. But even so, I should take it on the chin. I should carry my cross with a smile because Jesus carried his cross for all of us. And then on top of that, when I act like Peter in ways that are maybe contrary to the plans that God has for me or for my life or whatever, when I want something different, Jesus kind of rolls his eyes at me, and sees me kind of on the same level as Satan. And so, really, Alexander, I don't like this story. When you told me this is the story we were going to talk about, I'm like, I don't like this story because I struggle to read it because it reminds me of that teaching that if my life isn't hard, it's because I'm not following Jesus hard enough. And so there's a lot of guilt around this passage for me. So I spent a lot of time in my own life, my own quiet time, really wrestling with like those easier moments of my life, feeling like extremely guilty that somehow my happiness in a way makes God even just a little bit disappointed in me and in my life. But that's obviously not at all what's going on in this passage. So maybe it could take us into it if we deconstruct it a little bit. How can we reconstruct it into something different?
So I think probably as one of the core images of Christianity is the great symbol of the cross.
Mhm.
But we need to understand the cross in an entirely fresh way.
Mm.
The hold on, but I
Buckle up.
know the cross does not refer to Golgotha. The cross does not refer for our earliest ancestors. The cross did not refer to the instrument of Jesus's death. I have on my meditation places this image of the cross that was gifted to me by some pilgrims a few years ago. This four-armed equidistant cross. This is the primary shape of the cross for the first 1,000 years of Christianity. This is not the shape of what Jesus was nailed to. And what's even more important for us to remember is that this image of the cross has been in the Mediterranean world for 2,000 years before Jesus. It's a primary image in the Mediterranean world. And the word the cross is a primary name in the Mediterranean world. And what does it mean? It means living beyond difficulties. It means life after death. It means a journey of healing. And it means picking up and following, in my language, your authentic life, your authentic path. Now, why within mere years of Jesus's death and resurrection would our earliest ancestors not have drawn the shape of what Jesus died on, which everybody knew what he died on? Jesus died on something that looks like the letter T. It was actually, in those days, many people called what Jesus died on the stela, the pole, because the pole of execution was permanently placed in the ground. And the person who was condemned to die carried the crossbeam.
Mm.
And when they arrived at the place of execution, the crossbeam was put up on top of the pole. Now we have the shape of the T, and now the person to die was affixed to this. That image was never part of Christianity for like 1,200 years. Why did we draw this four-armed equidistant image? Why did we make this four-armed equidistant image the shape of the baptistry? It's the primary shape of the baptistry for 300-400 years in Christianity. So my work is reminding us that we continue the Jewish sense of the journey with God, the journey with Yahweh, the journey with the holy breath. And Judaism understood that that holy breath, the journey, had four places in it. And it refers back to the four questions on the night of Passover. And that's also why Christianity ended up having four gospels, because each gospel was going to relate to one of those four places on the journey. For that reason, Christianity came upon this ancient symbol, 2,000 years older than the life of Jesus, as the core symbol of our tradition, because our tradition was going to be how we pick up our own journey to live an authentic life. And that authentic life is a holy life. To be truly yourself, not in an ego sense, but to truly live from that deep design that God has for you in an authentic way. That's the path of holiness. And that path of holiness has got four parts to it in an ever ongoing journey. And so each part of the equidistant cross refers to the four questions of Passover, refers to the four gospels in the Christian Bible, refers to an image of pick up your journey to authenticity and follow in the way I will show you. Incredibly beautiful teaching about living into the person that the Holy One wishes you to be.
Mm.
And as ecstatic as that may sound, it also has trials and obstacles. But this is not about a road of martyrdom. This is about a road of utter freedom to live a life of true love and compassion, justice, and reconciliation, and to live it in your unique way. So I love this. And this is what Peter is not understanding. Peter is, when Jesus says, I have to go to Jerusalem and I'm going to be put on trial, Peter's been reading the script. He's like, look, Jesus, you walked on water, you calmed the storm, you you healed my mother-in-law, you brought Jairus' daughter back from the netherworld. You don't have to do that. Write a new script. You're God. And what Jesus is saying to Peter, Peter, there is a journey. I'm on it. You're on it. We're all on it. And that journey has some difficult moments. It has some beautiful moments. And it's a journey that will walk you into a place in your life that will be the most vital, creative, loving person you could ever be. Will you pick up that cross and follow in the way that I am teaching you, is what Jesus is saying. But Peter can only hear about the difficulties. And Peter, like all of us, do I have to buy this journey that's going to have some rainy, stormy days?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost
But that's
like Peter was like, Jesus, you got to go back to Messiah 101. You gotta, you're flunking the course. This isn't what you're supposed to do.
yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
And I love that if you know the meaning of the word Satan, in English people say Satan, but Satan is an adversary. Satan is a questioner. And as a questioner, almost like the Satan is a foil that helps Jesus give us the deeper teaching.
Yeah, that word Satan carries a lot of baggage with it, because I imagine, Jesus looking at him and calling him this red devil with horns and a pitchfork. Like that's who you are, Peter. But that's not at all like you said. When you think of the root of that word and what it means, it's something much deeper and more profound than that.
Yeah, just, you know, Peter is in most of the Gospels the every person.
Hmm.
He gets to ask the questions that we all would ask, I would ask.
Right. Right.
Peter's the guy you'd always want to take out to the pub and have a cool one with.
Yeah.
Um, you don't want to do that with Paul. Paul's gonna give you the lecture. Peter's gonna understand.
Yeah.
But that's why in the gospel text, he can always be the one. He's such a lovable character. He can always be the one to ask the difficult question that really most of us are thinking.
So then is it safe to say like what a good way to kind of sum that up would be that like maybe people like in my tradition growing up in the way that I grew up, it was kind of like this was seen as, Jesus kind of shaking his finger, saying, "You've got to carry your cross, Peter. You've got to be like me, Peter." When in reality, talking about this equidistant cross, things you just brought up, it's more like an invitation from Jesus, like, "Come on, come and discover your true, authentic self and live into that. No, don't live into all these stories you've been told or all these different things you've been made to feel like you've got to do, but come and discover. Come with me. Let's go discover who we really are and our true." Authentic selves. That be a good summary?
It is because your authentic self is going to be a life of meaning and a life
Mm,
of service, and you're going to find ultimate fulfillment in it.
mm,
That doesn't mean that every day on that journey is going to be easy,
yeah,
but it's going to be worth it.
yeah. Alexander, you're blowing my mind like you always do. All right. Last question for you. So, think about the people who might be listening to this, everyday people listening to this story, maybe hearing it in a way that they've never heard it before. Um, what what does this have to do with them in their life today? Maybe there's a mother or father, a grandparent, or maybe even a teenager going to school, or maybe somebody who's even a pastor. They're leading a church, whatever kind of walk of life they've got, 9 to 5 job, paying the mortgage. What does this story about Peter and Jesus, this interaction, have to do with them? And I love those kinds of questions, by the way. I love bringing these questions to the text because it makes me wonder about like what is it about this particular story that humanity has found so intriguing and so helpful that in our modern technological age where we can be thousands of miles away on a computer screen, we still have this ancient story sitting on our shelf that we're talking about and wondering about today. So bring this home into our everyday lives if you could.
So truly, as we grow, we will come to understand. I hope we will come to understand. Then when we hit those really difficult moments, that those difficult moments are usually the moment where the new story begins. Those difficult moments are not how the old story ends. So when your world is breaking apart, when a blue sky day has turned very rainy, stormy, um, when you've lost your job, when a dear one is ill, when someone that you always thought might be with you has gone, uh, when you get that call from school about we need to talk to you about your child, whatever that moment is, when you wonder if you can live through it and you wonder, is this how the story ends? Jesus is saying, this is how a new road for your own vital creative life begins again. And I'm with you. So, all through the Gospel of Matthew, if you go through underneath any of the texts, it's this beautiful refrain. Remember, you're not doing this alone. Remember, I am there. I am with you. Emmanuel. And as the very last line of the Gospel of Matthew is going to say again, I am with you until the end of all time, which means I am with you always.
Mm.
Because of that, we can do this together.
And that's why he's the Messiah, right? That's the breath. That breath never leaves you no matter where you go. In all of creation, it's always there.
When you breathe in and when you breathe out, you
Yeah.
are breathing the Messiah.
Yeah. Well. All right, my friend. Well, I think we all have significant amount to chew on. So we're just about out of our time allotment that we had, and my coffee cup is empty. So I need to go
Right.
and fill it up, get some more. But this has been fun, and we'll do this again soon, right? We're gonna do some more of these.
Please. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.